Kylie, I live in New Zealand. So here it's about 5 a.m. in the morning. And as I said to Steve, we're just coming into spring, which is the opposite to most of you. That's why I'm not on a lot of the Zwift events, because often they're middle of the night. Up until 5 years ago, I definitely was not a runner. I wasn't an athlete of any sort. In fact, I used to tell everybody that I was allergic to running, and that I was allergic to exercise, full stop. I'd never done much of anything. But when I hit 40, I was diagnosed with a form of arthritis called spondyloarthritis, which is the earliest stages of ankylosing spondylitis. It runs in my family. My brother also has it, and 2 of my kids have forms of arthritis as well, including young Samantha, that some of you will have seen on some of the events or on Zwift. She's 9. Now, this wasn't a new thing. I can trace it back to when I was 11, but over the years, hang on a second. Right. Sorry, Lucas, I'm just going to mute you for a second. Mute all. Right. Over the years, I'd been told that there was nothing wrong with me. I was imagining it. My mind was playing tricks on me, and lose a bit of weight, do some exercise, you'll be fine. I went to different specialists, and it wasn't until I found the right one when I was 40 and figured out that it was arthritis that I finally got some help. Only the medication here in New Zealand that I would normally take to stop the progression, I don't qualify for, and I couldn't afford it because it was about $2,000 a month. So my only option was to start exercising. I did this by going to a physio attached to the local swimming pool down the road from me, and he put me in the hydrotherapy pool, and I was so bad and I was so weak from years of the pain and fatigue that I was actually specifically told not to use the gym and not to swim, just to walk in the warm hydrotherapy pool. After a couple of months, somebody on the front desk asked me if I was working towards something, if I had a goal. And I explained what I was doing, because at 5:30 in the morning, almost every day I was there. I explained what I was doing and why, and they suggested I come up with something, to keep myself motivated, basically, because it's not when you first start, it's further down the track, that you kind of lose that enthusiasm. And it popped into my head, I'd always wanted to do a triathlon. I tried to do one about 15 years earlier, never quite got around to it. So I went home and told my husband, Tony, that I was going to do a triathlon. He was seriously unimpressed because he was positive I'd hurt myself. In fact, he flat out refused to even discuss it with me. I think it was about a week before he relented and we sort of discussed it. So the swimming pool has a gym attached. They gave me a pass to use the gym for 2 weeks. And the first thing I did was sit on the recumbent cycles and just turn my legs over and walk on the treadmill. Now, when I say walk, I mean seriously slowly. I had a lot of issues with my ankles. I still do. And walking could be very, very painful. I hadn't discovered Zwift at this point. This is long before I got to Zwift. And I was just walking and riding the bike. This went on for a little while. It took about a year till I was actually strong enough physically to do the first triathlon. And I loved it. I walked most of the run. My actual doctor didn't want me running at all. I walked the run, and I had a lot of issues in the swim and the bike, but I was determined I was going to do more. But at that point, I hadn't even heard of IronMan, and I still was under the impression I would need to walk, not run. Anyway, about a month later, I did my second one, which was a little bit longer, and I'd had a little bit of a scare. One of the things the arthritis does is it basically causes your joints, where your ligaments and tendons attached to the joint, they get really inflamed and they calcify and it can form bone. And that's what the exercise is trying to prevent. And I had a scare and my ribs don't move, so I can't inflate my lungs properly. And when I swim, I was having these attacks. I guess you could, a little bit like asthma. And one of them, I'd had such a large amount of chest pain that the emergency services had done an EKG, and my doctor wanted me to have a full cardio workout. So when I did the slightly longer triathlon, my husband Tony decided that he would join me just for moral support and to make sure nothing went wrong while we were doing it. He was swimming at that point, but that was about it. So he did the triathlon with me, and afterwards he actually said, "Nah, I prefer the long open distance swimming. I'm going to stick to that. Triathlon's not for me." About a month later, I found out he'd signed up for IronMan. Now, this is IronMan New Zealand, and for those of you that don't know, IronMan is a 3.8k swim, 180k bike ride, and then you run a full marathon afterwards. And I thought he was absolutely insane. It's like, nah, no way in hell I could ever do that. But as I watched him train over the next 9 months, he put a lot of dedication in, a lot of hard work, and I went and watched him race, and he did really, really well. He finished way within the cutoff time, which is 17 hours. I think he was like 14 and a half hours or something silly. And for a guy that's in his 50s, I was seriously impressed. And I looked at all these athletes going, oh, I wouldn't mind doing that one day. But I didn't tell anyone that that was my goal. I was feeling a lot stronger. The exercise keeps my joints moving. It keeps the pain at bay. I don't have all the sudden flares that I was getting. So in order to do Ironman, which is kind of in the back of my head, I figured, well, okay, I'm going to have to do this very, very gradually. I can't go out there and just go for a run like the average person. I would be pretty much crippled for a few days. I slowly build up to things. Sorry, someone just asked me about how to join, I think. So it had to be a very gradual build up. I was starting to try and run. Mostly if I would go for a walk and we'd get to a downhill, I'd run the downhills when I started. I certainly couldn't run up a hill. I still struggle with that. I couldn't just get out and go for a continuous run either. It was very much a run-walk scenario. I think I can count on one hand the number of times that I've done a continuous run. My longest was actually on Zwift, running with Gina, and that was about 7.5 Ks. And I've done one race recently where I managed the whole 5 Ks for the running race. Usually, how far was my first triathlon? My first triathlon was what we call a tri-a-tri. So it was a 100-meter swim, and you were swimming parallel to the beach. If you watch a lot of the ladies that are very inexperienced, they actually walk it. We then had to ride for 10 kilometres, and then the run portion was 2.5 kilometres. So it wasn't very big, and I was okay. I actually swam the swimming bit because it was only 100 metres, which is 4 lengths of the average swimming pool. For those of you that deal in yards, is it? I think. Yeah, we deal in kilometres and metres. The bike was in the rain. And as I said, I walked most of the last bit. No way I could run at that point. So anyway, I found myself a coach eventually. I approached several. Most of them didn't want to take me on because of my condition. They didn't really understand what it was, and I think they were scared that I'd get hurt. I found a coach in New Zealand, an amazing man, Tony O'Hagan. He trained people, older people my age, as well as the really young kids, like Samantha's age, from 10 up. And then he also trained some of the pro athletes. So he did a wide range of people. Anyone who was interested in putting the time and effort in, he was willing to help. So I sent him an email one day, and within 24 hours, I had a full training program. And I'm looking at what he put up. I use a program called Training Peaks. Everything gets uploaded to that. I record it on my Garmin watch, and then that uploads to the Training Peaks so he can see it. And then he can make notes, or I can make notes, and he can adjust things accordingly depending on how each session goes. And I looked at what he was giving me, and it's like, oh boy, what have I got myself into here? My first question to him was, would I be able to do IronMan? And he looked at what he was doing and he said, well, I don't see why not. We're just going to have to take a very, very slow, cautious build up to it. So whereas my husband did it in 9 months, it took me 5 years to slowly, gradually get someone else, to slowly build up the endurance and the strength to be able to do it. For me, I do strength work at least 2 or more times a week, just to maintain what most people would do regularly. Every time I have a flare, basically I lose all my strength and I've got to start again. On the way, I had to learn how to understand my body. There's that saying, use it or lose it. It was very much like that for me. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't done any form of real exercise. And every time I had a flare, the pain causes your muscles to switch off. It's not because there's an issue with my muscles. I used to take something that would help me sleep at night, and that made me very weak as well. So many years of weakness, I had to then rebuild all that strength. I had to switch my muscles back on. If you go out there and try to do something and you've got any area of weakness, you have that potential to cause injury. So I would go out and I would start a ride or a run, or I call it run. A lot of the time, a large portion is walking. And often I would feel really bad. And my ankles, especially for the running, were about a kilometre in, would start to get really, really bad. It felt like you were walking with a couple of twisted ankles or a couple of broken ankles or something. The pain was horrendous, to the point that I dreaded trying to run because of it. But what I had found is that if I pushed myself, if I could keep going, I'd get to about between 20 and 30 minutes and the pain would subside. I'd been to the physio, I'd asked the rheumatologist, nobody could tell me what was causing the pain. And I had to learn what days that I really pushed to keep going, and then what days it was a bit more serious and I had to back off. Fortunately, I'm really lucky that most time, if I just keep myself going, it will settle. It took 2 or 3 years to figure out what was triggering the pain, and it turned out it had nothing to do with my ankles. I still do have issues there, and I'm still working on it. I'm fingers crossed. I've got an idea now. The initial problem actually came from a lack of strength in my hamstrings and my glutes. I found someone who is a specialist in biomechanics for people, and he dealt with triathletes. I did a session with him, and he picked up that I had a lot of weakness there. So what was happening when I tried to run was, to lift my legs, I was using my calves and my lower legs to do all the lifting. My hamstrings and my glutes weren't activating to help with the body pattern and the movement. So I came home and I started doing exercises on those. And within about a month, I'd actually noticed quite a big difference. I still do get it at times. If I'm running along now, I'll look for a bus stop or something like that, if they're really sore, and I can sit in the bus stop and I have certain exercises I do. It has to be a bus stop or a bench or something, because I have to be sitting. The symptoms sound very familiar to me. Yeah, I think a lot of people do get issues and they don't necessarily understand what it is. Where you get the pain isn't necessarily where the issue is, and that's what I found. it was actually being able to understand what, when you're running, what muscles you need to and what strength you need. And a lot of runners don't do a lot of strength work. So if you're doing a regular strength exercise routine to help with your running, you're going to overcome some of these issues that may be causing pain somewhere. As I said, I'm still working on mine because it's changed a bit now. But I'll sit in the bus stop, and to activate my hamstrings or my glutes, I literally try to lift my legs while I'm sitting, only lifting it from my butt rather than from my lower legs. And if I can do, say, 20 of those on each side, the instant I sit down, the pain goes, and I'll do about 20 on each side, and then I can get up and carry on. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I found the longer I run for, the better I feel, which tells me that it's